There are deals that do not belong to this world. Markets that trade not in coins, but in the light of your soul. And voices that wait just beyond the reach of dawn whispering, "What will you offer?" They say, in the hills beyond Mwanga village, there's a road that doesn't appear on maps. It only appears when the moon bleeds red, and the air feels thick, as if the earth itself is holding its breath. If you walk that road after midnight, you'll find it. A market that glows in the dark, filled with stalls made of smoke, and merchants with no faces. They sell what no human shop could ever sell: beauty that never fades, love that never dies, wealth that fills your hands until your arms break under it. But every purchase demands a trade. And in that market no coin is ever enough. Some trade memories, some trade laughter, and some, like Makena, the woman whose story you are about to hear, trade something far more dangerous. Because Makena didn't go there to buy. She went there to bargain. And the shadows, they don't bargain fair. Mwanga was not a forgotten place. Not quite. It sat somewhere between the living world and the ghosts of the past. A rural African town where cement houses stood beside old mud huts, and cell phone towers blinked red over fields that still remembered blood sacrifices from centuries ago. By day, it was quiet. Children ran through the dust, women sold cassava by the roadside, and radios hummed gospel songs from cracked speakers. But by night the air changed. The winds spoke in riddles. And the elders locked their doors early, whispering prayers to keep the night market from finding its way into their dreams. Makena, 29, had never believed in such tales. She was a teacher at the local school, practical, grounded, and tired of living small. Her father had died when she was 10, leaving her mother with debts that clung like leeches. Now, years later, Makena was the one carrying that burden, paying loans, fixing her mother's collapsing roof, caring for her sick nephew. And no matter how hard she worked, life seemed to pull her lower into the mud. The one thing she hated most was pity, the way villagers looked at her with half sympathy, half judgment. "Poor Makena," they'd whisper. "So smart but cursed with bad luck." But Makena didn't believe in curses. She believed in opportunity. And when it didn't come, she learned how to chase it. So when a stranger arrived in Mwanga, a man in a gray coat who spoke softly and carried old scrolls written in a language no one recognized, Makena listened. He came to her class one afternoon, saying he was researching local myths. He called himself Mr. Obiero, though no one ever saw him eat or drink. And his eyes, cold and strangely reflective like obsidian, made even the boldest villagers uneasy. He asked Makena about the Market of Shadows, the same legend her grandmother had once warned her about before she died. The market, said the old tales, appeared once every generation to test the hearts of the greedy. Those who entered seeking more than they needed never returned as themselves. But Obiero wasn't warning her. He was inviting her. "It's not a myth," he told her one evening after class. "It's a place of balance. Everything you desire has a price. The brave call it a curse. The wise call it a test." Makena had laughed at first, brushing it off like the rest of the villagers' ghost stories. But then he said something that froze her blood. "Your grandmother knew of it. She once went there, and traded something she could never reclaim." That night Makena couldn't sleep. Her grandmother, kind, secretive, always muttering prayers while rubbing an old silver coin, had indeed hidden things. And suddenly, the memory of her warning came back. Never follow the road that glows beneath the moon. The sellers there have long memories. Still, the words of Mr. Obiero haunted her louder than the warning. Place where everything has a price. What if, just what if, she could fix everything? Her mother's sickness, the house, her nephew's education, her own wasted years. She told herself it was foolish, until 1 week later, her mother's illness worsened. The hospital demanded payment by morning, or they'd stop treatment. Makena had nothing left to sell, nothing to pawn, except her faith in the ordinary world. That night, the sky burned crimson, a blood moon rising over the plains. And just beyond the mango grove she saw it, faint but shimmering, a path glowing silver in the dark, like something breathing beneath the earth. Her heart thundered. The stories, the warnings, the impossible. She stood there, trembling, torn between fear and desperation. Then she heard it. A voice, familiar, soft and distant, her grandmother's voice. "Be careful what you offer, my child. Shadows never forget." But when she turned, no one was there. Only the path, only the pull. Makena stepped forward. Once, and the world behind her faded, replaced by whispers, flickering lights, and the sound of distant music, too strange to be human. The market of shadows had opened. The first thing Makena noticed was silence. Not the ordinary kind. Not the quiet of sleeping trees or the pause between crickets, but a silence that seemed to listen back. It swallowed her footsteps, as though the very ground were holding its breath. She looked around. The path she'd followed was gone. In its place stretched a road paved with glowing dust, leading through towering silhouettes of stalls that shimmered like smoke trapped in glass. Each stall flickered, sometimes whole, sometimes half-real, and behind them moved the sellers, or things that pretended to be sellers. Some had faces made of cloth stitched with black thread. Some had no faces at all, just smooth skin reflecting light like river water. And others wore masks carved from bones, smiling too wide. Makena's throat tightened. The air smelled faintly of burnt sugar and something metallic. Blood, maybe. Yet the sight was mesmerizing. Jewels that pulsed like hearts. Bottles that whispered when you walked near. Scrolls that fluttered without wind. A small stall near her right caught her eye. It sold reflections, fragments of light caught in mirrors that bent and twisted. When Makena looked into one, her reflection blinked back a second too late. "Careful," said a voice behind her. He turned. A merchant stood there, draped in shadow. His body too long, his hands pale and gloved. A thin smile traced his face, though his eyes were covered by a silk band. "First time here," he said. "You smell of hope. That's rare." Makena stepped back. "What is this place?" He tilted his head, as though listening to something she couldn't hear. "A market," he whispered. "Same as any other. We sell what people need. Sometimes what they deserve." He pointed to his wares. Small black vials filled with swirling mist. "Dreams," he said. "Yours or another's. Freshly bottled. Care to trade?" Makena shook her head. "I have no money." The merchant laughed softly. "Then you must use what all humans use when their gold runs out." He leaned close, breath cold as winter water. "You trade your time, or your truth." Before Makena could respond, something pulled her gaze further down the road. A stall brighter than all the rest. It shimmered gold and crimson, its awning rippling like silk in a wind that didn't exist. And from behind the stall came a voice. Melodic, familiar. "Makena. You came after all." Her heart stopped. It was her grandmother's voice. Makena froze. She knew that voice, the same tone that once lulled her to sleep as a child. But her grandmother had been dead for years. Still, she walked closer, unable to resist. Behind the stall stood an old woman wrapped in a faded blue shawl. Her posture bent, her skin wrinkled like folded paper. Her eyes glowed faintly with gold light. And on the counter lay the silver coin her grandmother had always carried. "You shouldn't be here," Makena whispered. The old woman smiled, the same soft smile she remembered. "Neither should you, child. But need brings us all, doesn't it?" Tears stung Makena's eyes. She stepped forward. "If this is some trick, stop it." "I don't. It's not a trick," the woman interrupted. It's a chance. Came here once too. I traded something to save our bloodline. And now you have come to finish the bargain. The coin on the table rolled toward Makena and stopped against her palm. It was warm. The market doesn't forget debts, the woman continued. It waits. Every generation it waits. For one of us to return and pay what remains unpaid. Makena shook her head. I don't understand. You will, said the old woman. Go to the heart of the market. Find the tent of the shadow keeper. He grants wishes, for a price only the brave can name. Before Makena could reply, a gust of wind passed through the stall. The woman's face flickered, her eyes hollow, her voice stretching like broken tape. Be careful what you promise, the apparition hissed, for the shadows don't sleep. Then she was gone. Only the coin remained, glinting in Makena's trembling hand. Makena wandered deeper. The market grew stranger the further she went. There were no stars above, only drifting lanterns that floated like souls. Music echoed, though no instruments were visible, just humming voices that rose and fell, chanting words that felt too old for her ears to understand. Every stall tempted her differently. One offered a potion that could rewrite one's past, erasing all mistakes for a single price, your truest memory of joy. Another sold names, dozens of them hanging from strings, pulsing faintly like fireflies. A merchant with a mouth sewn shut gestured at her, holding up a necklace that dripped black tears. Makena moved faster. The deeper she went, the colder the air became. Her breath misted in front of her face. Then she saw it, a grand tent rising at the market center. Its fabric was woven from moving shadows, and its entrance glowed with dull red light. Above it, a sign written in no language she could read shimmered briefly, then shifted, suddenly readable. The Keeper of Desires. Her pulse quickened. As she approached, she saw others entering the tent, villagers she recognized, old neighbors. A boy who had died 2 years ago in a flood. All of them pale and silent, their eyes dim like candle wicks almost out. Makena hesitated. Then she remembered her mother's coughing, her nephew's tears, the unpaid hospital bill. And she stepped inside. The air inside was alive, heavy with whispers that circled her head like moths. The walls were lined with mirrors that reflected not her face, but her fears. In one she saw her house collapsing. In another, her mother's grave. In a third, her own body lying still, eyes open. Then from the shadows he appeared. A tall figure draped in black robes that shimmered like oil. His face was hidden behind a mask carved from stone, expressionless, except for the faint smile etched across it. His voice, when he spoke, was both everywhere and nowhere. You've come far, Makena. She stepped back. You know my name. I know all who wander here. Desire is a beacon. I only follow where it leads. He circled her slowly, like a predator measuring its prey. Tell me, child of Mwanga, what do you seek? Her lips trembled. I want to save my mother. She's dying. No. I have nothing left to give. The keeper stopped. Nothing. No, that isn't true. Humans are full of things worth trading. Some they don't even value until they're gone. He reached into his robe and withdrew a small black bowl filled with water so still it looked solid. This is the pool of offering. Shows what you truly have to give. Look into it. Makena leaned forward. Her reflection twisted, not her face now but moments. Laughter with her nephew, the sound of her mother's voice, her childhood home bathed in sunlight. The keeper's tone turned almost gentle. You have love. Memory. Oh. All precious things. She clenched her fists. You can heal her. I can restore life if you pay the price that balances it. What price? She whispered. The keeper's mask tilted toward her. Your light, your shadow's loyalty. It will serve me for as long as your mother breathes. Makena frowned. My shadow. Yes, he said softly. That dark twin that follows you everywhere. It is not just darkness. It is your essence, the proof you belong to this world. Give it to me, and your mother shall live again. She hesitated, heart pounding. How do I know this isn't a lie? The keeper raised his hand. The water in the bowl rippled, and within it, Makena saw her mother lying in the hospital bed, gasping for air. Then the scene shifted. The woman opened her eyes, smiled faintly, whispering her daughter's name. Makena's tears spilled. You can do that. The market never lies, the keeper murmured. But remember, what you trade you cannot reclaim. Makena closed her eyes. Her mother's life. Or her shadow. What good was a shadow anyway? She reached into the bowl. The water burned cold against her fingers, and then it pulled. Her body convulsed as her reflection rose out of the bowl. Her shadow, black and writhing, torn from her feet like smoke. It screamed soundlessly, thrashing as the keeper caught it in his hands and folded it into a crystal orb. It is done, he said. Makena fell to her knees, trembling. The tent seemed to fade around her, and suddenly she was standing back on the moonlit road, the market behind her dissolving like mist. Her mother would live. She had done it. But the ground beneath her felt wrong. When she turned to walk, there was no shadow following her. For a week everything seemed perfect. Her mother's recovery was miraculous. The doctors called it impossible. Her nephew laughed again. Neighbors whispered that Makena must have found God's favor. But at night, the darkness changed. Wherever Makena went, shadows looked at her. Trees bent unnaturally toward her, dogs howled when she passed, and mirrors no longer reflected her properly. Sometimes in her peripheral vision she saw it. Her own shadow moving on the wall without her. It would wave. Sometimes it smiled. Then the dreams began. Dreams of the market calling her back, the keeper whispering. The debt is never paid in full. Not until the shadows rest. By the time the first week passed, Makena had started to dread the sunlight. It wasn't natural anymore. When it hit her skin, she could feel it. The light ignored her. It bent strangely, gliding around her form like water parting around a stone. And where her shadow should have been, there was nothing. First she laughed it off. She even showed her nephew, who clapped his small hands in wonder. Look, Auntie. You're like the angels from the stories. But at night, she began to notice other things. Objects in her room would move slightly, like something unseen brushed past them. Her own reflection would flicker, as though something stood behind her, but there was never anyone there. And sometimes when she walked past other people, their shadows stretched unnaturally toward her feet, like they were reaching for something she no longer had. It was subtle at first. Then one morning while sweeping her yard, she saw her mother sitting quietly on the porch, not moving, just staring at the ground. When Makena called her name, the old woman looked up slowly. Why? Her mother asked in a voice not quite her own. Does your shadow walk before you now? Makena froze. She turned, and for just an instant she saw it. A dark shape gliding across the wall ahead of her. Her shadow but walking on its own, moving one step before she did. Then it vanished. The broom fell from her hand. That night Makena couldn't sleep. The market haunted her dreams again. Lanterns swinging over endless corridors, merchants calling her name. When she awoke, she found sand scattered across her floor, glinting faintly like black glass. Then came the whisper. At first, she thought it was the wind through the cracks of her window. But the voice was too soft, too precise. You gave me to him, it said. But I was never his to keep. Makena sat up, trembling. Who's there? The whisper grew louder, colder. You took life from death. Now death will take what you borrowed. Her room went dark. The single candle beside her bed flickered, its flame stretching sideways, as if drawn by something unseen. And on the wall behind her, the shadow appeared again. It mimicked her movements, but wrong. When she raised her hand, it delayed a heartbeat, then moved faster, jerking like a marionette. Makena grabbed her mother's cross from the table and held it close. The shadow only laughed, a dry, rasping sound that came from everywhere. "You think light will save you? Foolish thing. I am the light's memory. I am what it hides." Then the candle went out. The next morning, Makena went to the village river. She hadn't eaten, hadn't spoken to anyone. Her eyes looked hollow, her skin pale. When she leaned over the water to wash her face, the river's reflection stared back. But it wasn't her. The reflection smiled. Not a tired human smile, a deep, splitting grin that stretched too far. It mouthed her name, then whispered, "Come back to the market. Your debt waits." Makena stumbled backward, fell onto the mud, gasping. Villagers nearby saw her scream at the water and fled, crossing themselves, muttering, "She's been touched by night." That night, Makena packed her bag. She took a lantern, her grandmother's coin, and the same dusty road she had walked once before. If the market wanted her, it would find her. But she would not run. Not again. The path to the market had changed. Where before there were trees, now stood endless dunes, each glittering faintly under a bruised red moon. The wind hissed like 1,000 whispers. Every few steps, Makena saw eyes watching her from the sand. Not animal eyes. Human ones, old, wide, filled with terror. Some blinked, some didn't. When she stepped closer, she realized they weren't eyes at all. They were faces, half buried, half melted, frozen in expressions of fear. The merchants, the lost buyers, the ones who'd bargained too much. Their murmurs followed her like flies. "Don't go back. The keeper never releases what he takes. You'll become one of us." Makena pressed on. She had to. By the time she reached the valley where the market once stood, the air shimmered again, bending, humming, and just like before, the market of shadows returned. But it wasn't as she remembered. The stalls were broken, twisted. Merchants stood motionless, their faces peeling away like bark. And at the center, the great tent rose, darker than before, its shape pulsing like a living heart. Makena stepped inside. The smell hit her instantly. Rot, incense, and iron. The keeper stood at the far end of the tent. But his mask was gone. His face, if it could be called that, was a blur of shifting darkness, a storm of hands and eyes that opened and closed, each whispering something different. "Ah, the shadowless one returns," he said, voice echoing like a dozen men speaking at once. "How does it feel to walk without weight?" Makena raised the coin. "You lied. My shadow is killing me." "I didn't lie," he replied. "You were never meant to separate from what completes you. You wanted life for another, and in doing so, you gave death a door." He gestured, and behind him, something began to crawl out of the dark. Makena gasped. It was her shadow, but monstrous now. A warped, stretching silhouette that slithered across the floor, its body made of smoke and teeth. Its eyes glowed faintly with her own color. Spoke with her voice. "I served you all your life," it hissed. "I bore your sins, your pain, your envy. And you sold me for gold." Makena stumbled back. "I didn't know." "You never wanted to know," it snarled. "You humans never do. You think your darkness is something to cast away. But it is what makes you whole." The keeper chuckled softly, spreading his many hands. "Now the balance must be restored. Either you return to the shadow, or it will walk this world in your place." Makena looked around. The mirrors on the walls now reflected her shadow, not her body. In every reflection, her own image was fading, her skin turning translucent, her face dimming. She realized, with a hollow ache, that her shadow was already consuming her from the inside out. "No," she whispered. "I won't let you take me." The shadow laughed, a sound like dry leaves scraping across glass. "You already did, the night you chose greed over grace." Lunged. Makena ran, crashing through the tent, pushing through walls of black silk that dissolved into fog. Everywhere she turned, her shadow followed, tearing through reality like ink bleeding through paper. She stumbled into a corridor lined with mirrors. In each reflection, her body grew fainter, until only the shadow remained whole. "You cannot flee yourself," it whispered from all directions. "You traded the light for a wish. Now the light refuses to remember you." Her steps slowed. She was fading. Her skin shimmered like heat. Her hands passed halfway through the ground. Then in the last mirror she saw something. Her grandmother's shawl lying folded across a table. She picked it up. It was real. She remembered her grandmother's voice. "Be careful what you promise." And suddenly she understood. The coin, the market, the bargains, they weren't curses. They were tests. Each generation had failed them. But maybe she didn't have to. Makena turned toward the shadow, clutching the shawl. "I'm sorry," she said, "for denying you, for pretending you were evil when you were part of me." The shadow froze. Its form flickered, uncertain. "You regret." "Yes," she whispered. "But I won't let you hurt anyone else. If you want me, take me." She stepped forward, arms open. The shadow lunged, and for a heartbeat the world went completely still. Then there was light. Not sunlight, something older, deeper. It poured from the shawl, from her chest, from every corner of the tent. The mirrors shattered. The keeper screamed, his form collapsing into smoke. The tent exploded outward in a roar of wind and sand. When the dust settled, the market was gone. Only Makena remained, standing in the desert, her body whole again. But when she looked down, her shadow was back, and it smiled faintly. By dawn, she returned to the village. Her mother was alive, still sleeping peacefully. Everything seemed calm again. Yet when Makena spoke, her voice echoed slightly, as though two tones whispered at once. When she passed by a mirror, her reflection moved a heartbeat too late. At night, she sat by the fire, watching her shadow flicker against the wall. It was still smiling. Then faintly it whispered, "We are one now. Forever." Makena didn't answer. She simply stared at the fire until it went out, and in the darkness, her eyes glowed faintly, like the lanterns of the market that opens only for those who dare to bargain with their own soul. The sun rose over Kijani village that morning softer than usual, as though the sky itself feared to wake whatever still lingered beneath the earth. The villagers found Makena outside her mother's hut, sitting quietly by the well. Her eyes were calm, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked whole. But something about her felt too still, as if the air around her had forgotten how to move. "Makena," one woman called, stepping forward cautiously. She smiled, that same gentle, tired smile everyone knew. But when she spoke, her voice carried two tones, one layered beneath the other like a ghost's echo. "The night has ended," she said softly. "But the shadows are not gone. They never are." The villagers whispered. Some claimed she had gone mad. Others said she had returned touched by the spirits, chosen by something beyond their world. Her mother tried to embrace her, but when she did, she shivered. Makena's skin was warm, yet there was an emptiness under it. A weightless feeling, as though part of her still belonged to some other place. From that day on, strange things began to happen around her. When Makena walked through the market, the lamps dimmed. When she passed by the children, their laughter faltered. When she prayed in church, the candles leaned away from her as if afraid to burn too close. And sometimes, when no one else was looking, she would stand completely still, her shadow flickering on the wall beside her. moving when she did not. It was the following new moon when the whispers began again. Late at night, the villagers heard footsteps by their windows. Slow, deliberate, dragging steps. When they looked outside, they saw nothing, only the faint shimmer of light moving without a body. One night, a boy vanished. He had been walking home after tending goats, the moonless road stretching long and empty before him. The next morning they found only his sandals, and beside them, a second set of footprints, small, bare, and darker than the ground itself. The elders gathered. Elder Nuru, the oldest of them all, spoke quietly. When someone bargains with the dark, it never forgets. The shadow is patient. It waits, even when we think we have tamed it. Makena did not deny what they whispered about her. She did not weep or curse or plead. She simply said, "It was my debt, not theirs. I will end it." And with that she left again, walking toward the edge of the desert where the market had once stood. The villagers tried to follow, but as soon as she reached the horizon, the sand rose like smoke, and the world swallowed her whole. Some say she found the market again. Others say the market found her. No one alive can tell what truly happened that night. But the old ones say the wind carried voices. Two of them, arguing, then crying, then finally falling silent. The next morning, the valley where the market had stood was empty once more. The sand lay smooth and untouched, except for a single mark, a circle drawn by a bare foot. And beside it, a handprint pressed deep into the ground. When the wind blew, it scattered the mark. And from that day onward, the market never appeared again. But on nights when the moon refuses to rise, the villagers say the air still tastes of burnt incense and iron. And if you listen closely, you can hear the faint jingle of coins that never stop falling. Years passed. Children who had once feared Makena grew up telling her story around fires. The story of the woman who tried to bargain with shadows. They said she had made a deal to bring life back from death. That she bought time with her own darkness. That she learned too late. Every light has a cost. And the brighter it burns, the longer its shadow stretches behind it. In some tellings, she became a spirit who guards the crossroads between life and greed, appearing to those who wish for more than they deserve. In others, she is a whisper that follows the desperate, offering them the same deal she once took herself. But the elders, the ones who remember the truth, say she still walks among them, not seen but felt. Whenever a villager stands under the sun and feels suddenly cold, whenever their reflection flickers for just a moment too long, whenever they see their shadow move a breath too late, they say softly, "Makena passes." And so the tale became warning, a story told to every child before sleep, every traveler before journey, every dreamer before they prayed for fortune. The darkness we fear, the elders would say, is not always our enemy. It is the part of us that remembers what the light forgets. For Makena's mistake was not that she loved too much, nor that she feared poverty, but that she tried to trade her darkness for gold, forgetting that without shadow, the soul loses its shape. They would say, "The shadow is not evil, it is truth." And those who sell their truth for wealth are left with nothing but reflection. And when the fires burned low, the youngest would ask, "Will the market ever return?" To which the elder would smile sadly and whisper, "It never truly left, simply waits for the next soul desperate enough to bargain with what cannot be owned." On a distant night, long after her name had turned to legend, a traveler crossing the old dunes claimed to see something strange. A woman walking barefoot under the stars, carrying a small lantern that glowed without flame. Her shadow followed close behind, then slowly turned and smiled at him. He ran, but the woman only watched him go. whispering softly into the wind. Do not fear your shadow, traveler. Fear the day it no longer follows you. And when he looked back, she was gone. Only the faint hum of the market's forgotten bells, and the echo of coins falling into nothing. The woman who tried to bargain with shadows is not a tale of monsters or curses. It is a tale of balance, of how we chase what glitters, forgetting that even the brightest gold casts a shadow. Makena's tragedy was not her greed, but her forgetting that darkness and light are two sides of the same soul, and that when we cut one away, the other begins to fade. So, if you ever find yourself walking under the moon, and feel your shadow stretch too far behind you, remember her. Whisper her name to the wind, not in fear but in warning, because the shadows are always listening. And if this tale of bargains and shadows kept you watching till the end, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more African folklore retold in the language of nightmares and truth. Each week, we bring you stories whispered by firelight, of greed, love, curses, and the haunting price of desire. Because in the world of old African tales, every story hides a debt, and every debt must one day be paid. This was The Woman Who Tried to Bargain with Shadows. Remember, the darker the wish, the brighter the price.